Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Solo Spotlight. I'm your host, Ryan McDougall. And today on Solo Spotlight, I'm sitting down with Kathryne Imabayashi, early years educator, parent of boys coach, and an author of Rising Boys Who Become Remarkable Men. This one's about seeing what we often miss, the unconscious bias we carry about boys, the mask many learn to wear, and the simple, everyday scripts that help our sons grow strong and kind. If you're a parent, teacher, coach, or you care about men's mental health, this one's for you. We get practical: how to respond when boys shut down, how to build healthy rites of passage, and why fatherhood hormones are real. One quick ask before we start this episode: if these conversations help you, hit subscribe, rate the show, and drop a comment with one change you'll try this week. Share this with someone who's raising boys, and check the description for links to Kathryne's book and coaching. With that, let's get into it.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Solo Spotlight, episode 55. I have Kathryne Imabayashi.
Imabayashi.
Imabayashi. I was tuned the pronunciations, and sometimes they're not that great. Imabayashi.
Yes.
How you doing? Welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on. I can't wait to have the discussion, especially surrounded boyhood and parent coaching, and just your journey as an educator.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to talk to a fellow Canadian.
Yeah, for sure. You're residing in Japan right now, correct?
Yes, I am.
Yes. Very cool. Very cool. Um, for someone that's just meeting you for the first time, how would you describe yourself?
Honest, driven, um, thoughtful, sensitive, analytic,
Yeah,
basic.
amazing. Yeah, you've had key focuses in coaching and writing. Um, is that is the Sonhood coaching something that you're particularly uh motivated on doing right now? Is that like your main driving force right now?
Well, I started it as a business, I guess about 5 years ago now, and I'm still very much excited and I love one-on-one coaching, and I love seeing results quickly with parents and with their children. And that will be an ongoing
Yeah.
drive and focus forever. But recently, in the last few months, I've because I also have a podcast that I started about a year ago, and I just started a new season a couple of months ago, and this season is talking to dads and men, young men, and experts in mental health, men's mental health and masculinity. And in the course of those 2 months, I've just gotten really excited and kind of fired up again. Up until
Mhm.
this point, mostly I'm with parents and educators. And listening, having the space, having the platform for conversations with young men, especially with young men and young dads, it has opened up a new view into
Mhm.
this world. So that is probably my biggest thing right now. And it's been so powerful. The conversations have been so powerful that I've decided I'm in the process of putting together an anthology based on some of the interviews to be able to share their conversations to a wider audience still.
Hmm. That's amazing. I always credit people, especially when it comes to such like a diverse thing that people can do in the world. I always say, like, when people start a podcast, or I think really to get the message shared and to do anything, you're simply just limited by creativity. And like it
Mhm.
seems like you're using that aspect to, have these conversations and be able to expand them to different audiences that might not especially in the educator realm, it's starting to become more and more frequent that like educational podcasts exist. And I think the type of long form conversations are like a great way to really get like a message sent and
Yeah.
be having those raw, real conversations. I want to dial back the clock a bit and talk about where did your journey as an educator start?
Well, I'm from the east coast of Canada. I'm from Nova Scotia. And
Same
when I,
here.
you're from
Yeah.
Halifax, right? I'm from the
Yeah.
Valley.
Okay. Nice. Nice.
So I had planned when I graduated from high school to go to Newfoundland to university because they had a really good program in social work, and that was the field I thought I was going into. But after the first semester, I had trouble with a student loan. I ended up leaving after the first semester and trying to figure out, what am I going to do next, or how am I going to be able to return at some point. And so education was a plan B. And that's all it was. It was I could get into teachers college. I went, I did my education there. At the time, if you taught for 2 years, you got a permanent license, which that doesn't exist anymore.
Mm,
So I taught for 2 years in my hometown and got my permanent license. And I thought that was just the backup. That was not my career, not my destiny, I thought. And then after those 2 years, I decided I knew I'd be leaving Canada at some point, I thought, and I wanted to travel as much through Canada and understand that as possible. So I started going west and I started working in daycares. And that's what really got me going in education. I loved working with the youngest children. And so that's basically how it started. And then when I left Canada, I ended up eventually in an international school, and then that started that road in international
hmm.
schools.
And I want to talk because you you've said a couple times, even in this first couple minutes, about like talking to parents and about being able to interact with like younger children and kind of going through that like understanding people's lives. Is that where like you started to want to learn more about like youthhood and like or boyhood, I guess? And what do you think the impact was when you started having children?
Um, well, I've always enjoyed working with children. I like to collaborate with people, so I really enjoyed being with us other educators. I loved working with the parents to try to make the best um, environment for the child. And as far as little boys went, I just always resonated with them. And I think it's because I have one brother, but the rest of the whole family is female, except for my dad. So the little boys I just found to be exciting. I loved their energy, their purity, and I got along well with them. So it was when I we had a child, my husband and I, we have a child, but later in life. So I was not a young mom. They called me a mature mom when I had our child, and he was a boy. And I thought, well, this is going to be fun. And I was quite excited because I was worried if it was a girl that I would be bringing up my own baggage and making assumptions about her based on my history. And I didn't want that. So with this little guy that just kind of popped out, it was okay. This is going to be fun. This is going to be good. And I thought I had an advantage because I'd worked for quite a long time at that point, both with children and with parents. So I was just keen. I was excited. I was ready for this next step. And the first couple of years, there was no big, aha moment or, it was just kind of really focused intently on parenting. And was still working and so on and so forth. It was when he was, I mentioned this in the book, I mentioned it on the website, but the story behind where this all started was when he was somewhere between 3 and 4, and we were living in Japan. And it was a Saturday morning. His dad was working and he wanted to go fishing, which really just meant, a little plastic fishing rod and, go into the creek. And so we did. And this little creek river was a little bit down, a treed road, but it wasn't that far in. And I was in Japan. I had no fear for my personal safety. So we were
Hmm.
down there and we were having a really lovely time. It was fun. It was, it was a beautiful day. And then out of the corner of my eyes, I saw a movement and in my mind it was a gang. There was a gang of, 5 or 6 boys coming down the path. And in that split second, I had this real guttural, instinctual feeling of fear, total fear. It was like, this is a gang and they're coming down the path. And how am I going to protect my son and myself? So these boys get closer and, it wasn't a gang of boys. It was a group of young boys that were in that summer between middle school, between elementary and middle school. And often that's when boys' bodies really, they're all arms, they're all legs, and it's just they have big growth spurts. And that year, that academic year, I had been teaching grade 5. And so, like more than anyone else, I should have recognized, that factor. So they came down, we had a lovely time. They were sweet boys. It was just a really wholesome, fun morning together. And so that could have been the end of it, and I wouldn't be doing any of this today. But I am very analytical, and I just want things to make sense. And if they make sense, even if I don't like something, I'm okay with it. But I need to make sense of things in my world. So that evening, I was on my own. My little guy was in bed, and I sat down and I started thinking about it. And I thought, why did I react that way? I have no trauma. I have no I have never been violated. I don't know much about violence. Like, I couldn't think of any reason why I had that instinctual reaction to these males
Hmm.
coming down. And I dug and I dug and I dug and I dug, and it was just driving me nuts. And then it was kind of just before I was ready to, give up. I had an image, and that image was, okay, my little guy is, 3 or 4. And so in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, is there going to be another mother, another woman who sees my son and is afraid, like really afraid for her safety? And not because of anything he's doing or saying or wearing, simply because he's a male. And that broke my heart. And that's like, something's
Hmm.
wrong with this picture. And I'm going to find out. I'm going to find out why is this? And then what can I do about it?
Yeah, and that led you on to making the book The Boy Code, correct?
Well, the Boy Code was the first book that I read, and
Yeah.
that's a book by Dr. William Pollock. And
Okay.
he's the person that first coined the term the Boy Code.
Okay. Yeah.
So the book
Um,
that I wrote a book a year and a half ago, and that was called Raising Boys Who Become Remarkable Men. And that's for
okay.
parents for children 0 to 8.
Right. And this unconscious bias, I think that's very true. And like, do you think this is something that is seen like everywhere? Like you talk about being in Japan, it being particularly safe. So you're kind of saying this is like an inherent, like, does this go down to like kind of like a biological makeup of like men and women and like the fact that men are kind of inherently seem more like not not violent, more like as a perpetrator or how.
Well, okay, so I think there's probably a whole study connected with different cultures. And I haven't experienced all cultures, but I've experienced quite a few of them. And I see a lot more similarities than I do differences as far as biases towards men. And
Hmm.
the most difficult thing about this conversation and about the work I do is that it's unconscious. So, like there was a couple of um, experiments that were done, a little bit of research that was done. One of them was with BBC, and they were doing a test about, toys, little girls and boys' toys, and doing that. But there was another experiment that I often use when I'm working with groups of parents, and it's showing a picture of a toddler, and the first picture is a toddler, and from the clothing, you make the assumption that it's a little girl, and individually, like you've got 5 or 6 adults, and individually you ask them, what do you think that child's name is? What do you think their character is? What's a possible hobby? And what do you think they might choose for a career when they grow up? And so you ask the 5 or 6 participants those questions with that picture. And then you bring out a second picture, and that picture is another toddler who is in traditional boys' clothing, and you ask the same 4 questions individually. And 100% of the time, almost, the answers are geared towards the gender. If it was the girl, what you thought was the little girl toddler, you answered, she's sweet and she's probably going to be an artist or a teacher or a nurse, and that kind of stereotypical answer. And the same for the what you thought was a little boy. He's got a baseball cap on backwards, so he's going to be trouble, that little one, and he's probably going to be a truck driver, or he might end up in jail, that road.
Hmm.
And then you bring out both pictures together and you say it's the same child. And you don't say
Hmm.
if it's a girl or boy, it's the same child. So your answers are totally based on what you think the gender is, and that is unconscious gender bias. So, but it is so hard. And almost everybody that goes through this kind of an experiment, almost everyone says they are shocked because they really believed they did not have any biases. They didn't stereotype,
Hmm.
genders, but it's there. It's just not obvious. So it affects how you interact with little boys, little girls.
Is there anything that parents can do to recognize unconscious bias?
Well, I think the most important characteristic for anybody, whether it's a parent or not, is being curious. Because the minute that you really turn on that curiosity, you're a little bit slower to make the assumptions. And so if you are curious, then you will start trying to learn more things to make you more aware of where this might be popping up in your life. And once you're aware, then you can do things about it.
Hmm. So it's kind of like having self-awareness as like your own being. I call it a lot of I call it main character syndrome. I
Mhm.
say people have main character syndrome. That's probably a term. Uh, uh, but yeah, that's really interesting because it is that like has that always been a thing, or is that something that like we as a society have like started moving towards? Has it been the immersion of social media? Has it been technology? Or have we like always been geared to have this unconscious bias?
Well, I think I think society goes through different, waves. So I grew up in the 60s. So I grew up with women's liberation. So that was the
Mhm.
beginning of, the term male chauvinist pigs. That was the beginning of, like songs by like Helen Reddy saying anything, I am woman, I can do anything, I am strong. And during that movement, it was a very powerful thing to try to raise standards for women, to try to improve their life, basically. And what I remember going through it all, like it was very strong. I never heard anything about, supporting men or anything. Men were kind of at the other end of it was, if I'm going to build myself up, then I need to be putting him down. Like there was nothing
Mm-hmm.
about being equal or that kind of thing. But then I remember in the 80s, I was working in a daycare in Vancouver, and it was a very progressive. It was known as being a very progressive daycare. And one of the things that attracted parents is that we were so open to neutrality. So the understanding was or the thinking at that time is there is no difference between the genders. And so if the little girl wants to, use the hammer and build in the block corner, then that's good. Like we're going to encourage that. If the little boy wants to dress up in a tutu in the dolly corner, we're going to encourage that. So that was the time frame of it being there is no difference. I think we're finally at a point where people are recognizing there is a difference, and those differences need to be recognized and respected, basically, in order for us to move together as a society a little more wholly.
Mm-hmm. How do you think how do you think like or what do you think are like practical steps that parents can do to break down these stereotypes and help their sons like emotionally express themselves?
I think one of the first things to do, the first thing has to be that you recognize how you are interacting. And, something as simple as if you have in the back of your mind when you're going to have some interaction with your son, um, if in the back of your mind you think, would I react the same? Would I say the same thing if it was my daughter? And sometimes that's just enough to catch that you are responding with bias and not just with the facts as they're going, um, because of some of the biases that happen. Often people don't speak as much to little boys. Like there's all kinds of research done in hospitals even. It's just that's the way the biases are interfering with growth. And so one of the things that parents can do is be very intentional from the youngest of age to have really, you know, conversations with your child and not limiting, like really creating that extra emotional vocabulary, letting them express themselves in all ways, but supporting that, because what's happened up till now is that we don't do that with our boys very much. We do it with the girls because the girls give it right back to us too. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's one way that they could do it. Another thing is for parents to be really aware of their little boy's self-esteem, because one of the things that is the most challenging part of raising a little boy is their reaction to embarrassment and shame. And it's kind of the worst thing that you can do to a little guy. Maybe it's all guys, but to do to a little boy, to do something that embarrasses him or shames him, it just crushes him. So the more, and that will happen in society. That will happen when he's in school. So as a
Mm-hmm.
family, the more you can do to try to um, create that sense of self-worth, self-esteem, make sure that he's participating in the family, that he feels like, he's valued, and those kinds of things can, and then just really, like really show a lot of affection and love. Like
Mm-hmm.
that you can't go wrong with any of those things.
Do you think something like this should be taught in like academia? like I always see in certain universities they have a women's study course. Should there be a male studies course?
Oh, without any doubt.
Yeah.
Without any doubt.
And
It's without the knowledge. When you don't have the knowledge, you can't make things better.
mhm. It's very interesting because you see it where like this type of being overlooked or the expectation is different when it comes from males than it looks at females, where you see that empowerment across the board in terms of even throughout the years, there is like avenues. And not to say that I think that's amazing, but it's very interesting how the it starts to dwindle when it comes for male empowerment or like understanding. Um, how would something like that? Do you think something like your coaching is kind of driving the force into trying to create this into like a more prevalent conversation?
I think there are more conversations happening now than there has been in the past. I think, you know, I think that when there's no acknowledgement of the inner world of a male and what they're going through and how society treats them, and it's difficult because there's lots of things that aren't so good, lots of the statistics for people, who ends up in prison, who is committing the crimes. The majority of it is the
Is
male. So there's a lot of
right.
that stuff there. But then you look at the other side of it. Who's committing the majority of the suicides? What is the
Mhm.
percentage of suicides and how it's increasing? What is the state of loneliness and isolation and apathy that is in young men? Like, there are so many things that we're not talking about. It's
Mhm.
starting. It is starting. There's something, I just read it this morning, actually. There's something on November 8th, and it's a global, oh, I can't remember what they're calling it, but it's male awareness, and it's something connected with removing the mask. And
Mhm.
it's something that it's oh, sorry, I just read it
Huh.
this morning, like when I was, do you see it there?
Uh, I'm just looking for it right now. I don't see anything.
It's November
Uh,
8th, 2025. Maybe make the mask or remove the mask. The
let's
one
see.
of the main people is Ashanti somebody.
Removing the mask, self-alignment. I don't see anything right here on Google, but that's not really the best. No, I do not see anything of the, but I'm sure, yeah, November 8th. No, there's nothing showing up. Interesting.
Huh. I came across it actually on LinkedIn, and
Okay.
and there was a lot. Actually, LinkedIn is a really good place to get a lot of really quality information about what is going on, as far as men's movement goes and men's
Huh.
understanding and advocacy.
Yeah, I see one here by Jonathan Hermana. Uh, executive and leadership coach, mentor to coaches, managing director of Center for Transformational Coaching.
Maybe if you look under Richard Reeves, and
Richard.
um, and that's what that took me. I'm sure it was him that had shared about the thing that was happening on, I think it was anyway. I could be wrong. I could probably look
Yeah,
myself.
I'll definitely have to look more into this. But that's very interesting. It's interesting that that's being done, and interesting that it's starting to be, a thing that's
I think,
recognized.
yeah,
Yeah, it's just it's very nice to see that because it I think it's going to empower people to understand the differences that like men and women have to go through in life, and the kind of expectations or the societal rules that are quote unquote set up in terms of establishing, expectations for men, establishing expectations for female, but also just having the awareness and understanding. I think it's again like make it make sense, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's one thing that you kind of said early on is like just make it make sense. So it's like if you're going to have studies for one gender, why would you not have studies for another gender? And it's interesting because I think it's so far I think it's so outside of people's minds that then when
Yeah.
it's discussed, it's like, oh, you are right. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Um,
Yes, that's what it's all about. It's the creating the awareness. Like you can't unsee something. Like once you know it's
mhm,
there, once like you can't unsee it, and so that makes you a little bit more compassionate. And it I think it motivates people to be looking
mhm.
at things differently, and that that's where change starts.
And is there any like studies that are done that kind of describe what like formative years are for like boys? Is there an age range of like they're the most impressionable, or is there any like difference in something like that where it's like I'm kind of what I'm trying to ask is like
Yeah.
how is this unconscious bias being studied and from what age range, and is there like more of an important like you got to get in and be like really encouraging and providing that outlet for your child up until X age range, and if you don't it's going to be a lot harder based on if they get into school or this that and the other thing.
I think in general, it's recognized that, the first 7 years of a child's life are formative. That is where their identity gets formed. That's where they develop their character. I'm really not good at remembering and being able to state back, oh, this particular study said this and that said that. I'm not good at that, but I know the information is there. But one of the things that has always stuck in my head is that there was a study, and the result from that, what they found out was that little boys as young as 5 years old already understood what the limitations were for being a boy. That you don't cry, you don't show weak emotions, you separate, you don't be a mama's boy. Like by 5 years old, that is solid, that's ingrained.
Mhm.
That's a scary thing.
Yeah. And is that something that now playing devil's advocate is trying to how would I say this? I I wonder if that's going to affect like the trajectory of like manhood in like a sweeping thing where like what can we expect that would change if like boys under the age of 7 or up until 7 are more educated on their self-awareness and their ability to share more emotions. How can we see this actually like as a tangible thing in their later years?
So what happens is every time, or the way I visualize it, that every time a little boy shows his true feelings. So say he's 3 years old and he's out with his dad learning how to ride a two-wheeler. He falls off, he hurts himself, scrapes his knee, cries. He cries. His dad says, or his mom, who's ever there, say, "Oh, pick yourself up. It wasn't that bad. Don't cry. You know, get on the horse and go again," kind of thing.
Mm-hmm,
What that teaches that little boy is that emotion that he had of sadness and pain and showing, like crying, that is not acceptable. That's not an okay emotion to have and to show. And yet he is with one of the most important people in his world, his mama or his dad. So if he continues to cry and show that emotion, he's going to sever that connection with that very
mm-hmm,
important person in the world. And he doesn't want to do that. And so, in order to keep that connection, he will put on a mask. It's like, okay, I can be tough, Daddy wants me to be tough. I'm going to be tough. I'm not going to cry. So that mask goes on. But the problem is that with time, over and over and over and over again, that little boy shows something and somebody lets him know that emotion is not okay. That's not what it means to be a boy. So he has to put on another mask and another mask and another mask. So with time, that the pure, innocent little boy inside can't touch any of those emotions. So you might get a 16-year-old boy, an 18-year-old boy, and there are so many masks lined up that they can't get back to what's really the authentic, person that's inside there. And often that's when you see behavior that is not acceptable. You see young boys, lashing out or risky behavior or all that kind of stuff because they can't tap into to what was there in the first place.
And as a parent, having that situation happen, what would be examples of an appropriate response that a parent could have if their kid fell and got hurt?
Well, how would you react if it was your daughter?
Right. I believe I would react of like, everything's gonna be all right. How you feeling?
Yeah.
Um, where'd you hurt yourself? Tell me
Yes,
where it
exactly.
hurt.
Yeah.
Um,
Just acknowledging whatever emotion they're showing, acknowledging it, not putting restrictions on what they can and cannot show you, and then helping them, um, first of all, understand what that emotion is. Gee, that must have hurt. I see you're crying. That must have been really painful. And then
mhm,
moving forward, okay, what do you need to feel better? Like, do you need a band-aid? Do you need a hug? Are you just ready to get back on? How can I support you? And that's all you got
mhm.
to do.
I wonder if there's, based on what I'm hearing, I wonder if there's a correlation between substance abuse in males in their later years and based on like how much kind of emotional avenues they were given or their prerequisite to violence or outbursts or and I wonder if that has some sort of connection because they haven't found proper outlets or they even just weren't allowed to express themselves and maybe that's why we see such a high population of incarcerated males.
I'm sure that there's correlations, between all of that. Anytime that you have any kind of emotional pain, there's going to be outlets. And for boys, usually the most acceptable emotion is anger. And
Hmm.
so either you have a little boy who is like angry all the time and to the point of being aggressive and violent, or the other side of it is often they'll just shut down. Like
Hmm.
those are the two ways that usually the outlets happen for them. And
Hmm.
when you talked about, yeah, as they're getting a little bit older, one of the things that we don't have in our culture anymore, and I think it's another easy fix, is when, for example, when young girls, when they have their first menstrual cycle, they are recognized as moving from girlhood into womanhood. Everybody understands she's not a little girl anymore. Everybody understands there are things that go with that. There's responsibilities, there's more independence, there's, understanding about the body and the hormones and all that. That's all really well established. With a little boy, there aren't anymore really any real signal to say, okay, it's time to put away the boyish ways and start moving into manhood. There is no cutoff point. There's no rites of passage. And
Hmm.
so without having that rites of passage that kind of signifies, okay, and and also creates this village of men, just like women, they surround that little girl when she first has her first cycle. Like they give her the wisdom, the warmth, the support that she needs. Well, a rites of passage will do the same thing for a little boy. And when when boys don't have that signal, that now it's time, then that's when you start to see a lot of the risky behavior or substance abuse. It's kind of like, oh yeah, I'm going to show I'm a man. I'm going to race my car, do I forget what it's called, but the chicken thing where you both race
Hmm.
to each other
Yeah.
because that'll prove that I'm a man. Or I'm
Right.
going to go and I'm going to drink myself silly because that will prove that I'm a man. So it's like something as simple as a rites of passage can help support that boy to understand moving from one stage of development to another with the support and guidance that he needs.
Hmm. I when you're saying that, I think of like when you look in like very like caveman time when it's like they kick you out of the village and you have to bring back an animal. It's like how do we modernize that? How do we bring something like that that isn't as barbaric or as like finite, where it's like it can't be that sacrificial, but
Yeah.
I do believe you're right. It's like where is the line between someone becoming a boy to becoming a man, and depending on the family that they're raised in, depending on the society they're grown up in, it's very different. Whereas you look on a women's side of it, it's very definitive across the board of like, well, this is it. This is like the touch point of okay, this is like
Yeah.
so it's very interesting how that works. And uh now how would parents be like encouraged to uh, kind of, because I would think, well, in order for that to happen you need to have good role models, but how do you establish uh like a role model that's encouraging masculinity if like the father himself isn't that masculine?
So, um, two things I'll say. First is that there is more today than there's ever been. And one of the countries that I find excels at rites of passage is Australia, and they have things. They have set up things to help families go through that. And then I will tell you like our own story. So we left Japan when our son finished elementary school, and we went to Lebanon, and we stayed there for middle school and high school. And so when we left, he was 11, and somehow this rites of passage concept came into my world, and I started doing the research for it and trying to understand better how to do it. And so a parent, like, again, it's all about being curious and then getting the knowledge and then taking some action. So what we ended
Hmm.
up doing is I organized rites of passage for our son, organized the whole thing, wasn't part of it because it needed to be all men. But we were in
Hmm.
a country that we didn't have a whole lot of connections. There were limitations to what could happen. Like when you're talking about those mentors and that, there were enough people that, there were maybe 6 or 7 men that that were part of our world in the 2 years that we had been living there, that I could present this idea to them. And then for there was other people uh, that lived someplace else that weren't with us, but that I thought would be really excellent role models, and the connection would be really good. And so we did that by mail, but once the concept was set, like what the goals were, then it was just a matter of putting it all in place. Like I don't have any statistics on, okay, so how is what's been the benefit for my son? I don't know. But I know there's
Hmm.
nothing lost. And in
Right.
from my view, there could only be gains. The men that were there, they talked about what it was like for them when they were that age, when they were boys, 13 years old, what mistakes they made, what they wished they had have known. It was beautiful. I saw the
Hmm.
video.
Yeah, that is very it, it's interesting because something like that, would there ever be a fear that you're kind of like who I always say to people, like, who's the arbiter of truth? Like, how do I know that this person is like who I think is going to be a good role model is actually like going to set this person up for success? And I guess that's just like a vetting process of like,
Mhm.
but I think that's a really genius idea of having some type of idea or conversation or, you know, congregation of sorts in
A
order to like,
ceremony.
yeah, of course. When you look at other cultures like the Mi'kmaq culture or Native Americans, you
Yeah.
see that's
Yeah.
a little bit more prevalent. And then the farther you get into the modern age, the more and more it kind of escapes us. Eh, What do you think do you think like the idea of a role model is starting to go away? Like people and maybe not go away, but the way people are defining role models is changing.
Some things will evolve, and I think the presence of social media is having an influence that wasn't around before. But
Mhm.
I still think, like if you're intentionally parenting, or say for kids that for I'm speaking mostly for boys, but for boys that don't have the home environment, well, the other environment that they're in most of the time is school, and sometimes school can
Mhm.
be really hard for them, but sometimes there will be somebody in that school system. Maybe it's the coach, maybe it's their math teacher, whoever it is, who that person
Right.
becomes the role, and you only need one. It's good to
Mhm.
have a lot, but even if you just have that one role model to say, you can get through this and I'll support you.
Mhm. I want to get into talking about your podcast because I think it's very interesting that you wanted to start this. Um, Explain to me the inception of it and how you kind of again, it's coming off of your previous knowledge and background, but how did you kind of decide that this type of format was the best way to have these conversations?
It came about because I published my book in like March or April of a year ago. And so I understood that the best thing for me to do was to go on other podcasts to share what the book was about. And I loved it. I love podcasts, but I'd never been that deeply involved with them. But I really loved it. And it was my son in the summer. He said, because I didn't know, well, okay, what's the next step? Like, where do I go from here? And he said, I think you should start your own.
Mhm.
And that's how it started. So when it, like how things evolve. And when it started, I knew that I wanted to have conversations at that point with parents. I wanted to be able to have some kind of an impact on parents raising boys. So I had what was called the first season, and that was interesting, and I met some wonderful women who had some really dynamic stories. It was very cool. And then I decided what I called season two. I forget what I decided at that point. Hmm, isn't that funny? I made a switch anyway, and that's why I called it season two.
Mhm. So your
Maybe
season,
I'm season
sorry.
three now.
Yeah.
And this is, like I really believe in kind of destiny. And I think I had to go through those two steps. And this just feels like home, like this. So it was, okay, now I've talked with parents, I've talked with some experts, I've got a better, thumb on the pulse or feeling on the pulse
Mhm.
of parenting in some countries right now. But it always felt like something was missing. And what always had the biggest impact on me is my conversations with my son. And we
Mm-hmm.
have like great conversations, a lot of philosophical, talks. We talk about masculinity, we talk about society, like everything. And every time I have one of those, it's like, oh, this is where my heart is. But
Mm-hmm.
actually thought it was just him. And then I decided, okay, season three, because, there were two or three of his friends. And I thought, oh, they
Mm-hmm.
would be great. They would be great to interview. And that's kind of how it started. And I thought, okay, I want to talk to young men. I want to talk to fathers. And I want to talk to anyone who's connected with mental health, male mental health or masculinity. And so that was my focus. And so now I've had, maybe 8 or 9 interviews for this season so far.
Mm-hmm.
And I am astounded at the conversations. And part of me thinks the young men have not had the platform to really have serious conversations. Like what's it like for you? Like what's it like in your emotional world? And
Mm-hmm.
listening to some of these conversations, I've had two people very clearly, very recently, tell me the turning, and they're in their young 30s, and
Mm-hmm.
that the turning point for them was when they decided not to pull the trigger. And
Yeah.
it's like, so these conversations, like I know I'm a small fish in a big pond. I know that. But I
But it's
also
very
know,
alarming to see that. It's very alarming to
yes.
hear that.
Well, but who's listening? It's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
there needs to be more space to have real conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Like real conversations, and have somebody that will listen and not judge. Like
Right.
really be curious to try to understand and see how you can support, or at least just share the story. Because if someone else can hear the story and think, God,
Mm-hmm.
they had it really rough, like, and 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 this is where they are now, then maybe they will be motivated either by that story or motivated to reach out for help when they need help.
When you talk about interviewing men in like their younger years, what type of, if at all, consideration do you have when conducting those interviews? Is does the line of questioning change? Does does anything in that nature, or obtaining consent from parents? What exactly is the considerations when it comes to having younger males on to a
Well, they have to
podcast?
be adults. They have to.
Okay, yeah.
I haven't gone lower yet.
Like,
Maybe
yeah,
that's the next step. I don't know.
right.
Um, and how, so I have them, like you've done, to fill out
Yeah.
an intake form. And then I have a pre-interview conversation just to get a feel, what would be the most productive conversation to have with this person. And
Hmm.
and then I come up with a bunch of conversational starters to talk about different things. So it's really, some of it is generalized in masculinity, and some of it is very much geared towards that individual. But the whole focus is just trying to have the conversations about how how are you, in your understanding about what it means to have a healthy masculinity? What does it mean to have help for mental support issues for you? Like, what do you see as this way? And it's just to have the conversations.
And when you have these conversations, have you noticed like anything particular uh arises during like follow up with them after the episode?
Um, Most of them reflect that they hadn't thought about those things before. They hadn't been asked those things before. So, it gave them food for thought moving
Hmm.
forward. Yeah.
What do you think as a podcaster was your biggest setback in doing these 3 seasons, or biggest mistake?
I don't.
No, no,
Yeah, I
mistake's
don't
not
go
the
with
proper way.
mistake.
I'd say, what has been the biggest lesson that you've learned?
Mm, I think like with anything, uh, presence over perfection. Like some of the initial things I've done, actually anything that's on video that I've done, some of it I look at and it is cringeworthy. It's like, how did I ever allow that to go out there? But you know what? It's kind of that it's not about perfection. It's about
No.
really feeling that whatever you're doing, there's a purpose to it. And
Hmm.
um, and just sticking with your guns and trusting yourself that it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to have everything down pat. You just have to be present.
Hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. I always explain to people, especially people I interview that aren't necessarily comfortable in front of a mic. I tell them like, you're not here to do perfect. And I said, not every question you're gonna like hit right away. You're not gonna know how to explain everything. And I think like even just allowing people, especially when you come to those conversations that may be a little sensitive in nature, I think like the type of atmosphere you're trying to create is commendable because I think a lot of people, their motivation is what makes money make sense, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's not so much of trying to have those conversations. It's more again, it, you say there's like you have a very analytical approach, but when something like this, it's very natural and it's very like the walls are removed, right? Whereas
yeah.
some people would see podcasts of like engagement, engage, how can I do the thumbnails? How can I do this, right? Where it seems to me that like again, presence rather than professional, right? It's or performative, I think you said. Um, but yeah, it's really interesting that you're giving an avenue to to men that are able to discuss themselves in their younger years because again, they might have not had the opportunity to reflect on that, and you're giving them the avenue and kind of setting that up where they can have some reflection about that. Moving
Even s-
forward, yeah, yeah, go ahead.
even some of the because there's always something new to learn. And like even just very recently, I read something and then I started going down the rabbit hole with it. And then I was talking to my son about it. And then because of that conversation, he connected me with a friend and um, all connected with what happens to a father when a baby is born and the whole
Mhm.
role of a father. And like something as simple as, which I didn't know, but something as simple as if you're involved right from the very beginning with that baby, your testosterone will drop about 30%. And as long as you're involved, it will never go back up. So all of a sudden, how you used to feel hormonally has completely switched and you're much more geared towards nurturing. But if you don't have that idea, you might think that you're really having some serious identity problems because, like you can have male postpartum depression, the same as you can have,
Mhm.
the mums. It's like all of this stuff, if we just understood it better and recognize that, we need to understand men better because we're all in this together. It's not just about women, it's not just about men. It's like trying to really get a handle on what are our challenges and what are our gifts, and then, work together better.
That's interesting. That really is. And it's kind of the responsibility on everybody
Yeah.
to have some self-awareness. And again, it's not necessarily about men or women.
Mhm.
It's about understanding as a whole and kind of understanding that unconscious bias that we're all kind of have. Um, what moving forward, what do you think is next for you? Do you have a book, any new books that you're planning on releasing? What is season 4 going to look like?
Well, the next book is, and it's just, the kernel has just started now, but that will be based on season 3, on some of the interviews, not all of them, but some of the interviews. So that book is what's foremost in my thoughts at the moment. And I for season 4, if I ever finish season 3, like maybe I will never
Mhm.
finish season
Right,
3, but if I was going to move on to something, it might be a total focus on fatherhood and really try to explore that more deeply.
right, right.
Not
Well,
sure.
that's really amazing, and it's really motivating and inspiring to see how you're using the podcast medium as a way to empower male voices and provide that education that is very kind of unrecognized in today's society. And I think with work that you do and as well as work that other people do, we can create more of a culture that is allowing men to share their emotions and have those discussions, as well as educating parents on, proper parenting, or not necessarily proper parenting, but being involved in your child's life and allowing child, male or female, expressing their emotions, so we can kind of escape this unconscious bias
Yeah.
early on, and it allows us to be more informed. And it seems to me that, you know discussing this with kids in their formative years is can be very, very beneficial, and might lead to a more self-aware and emotionally regulated men, I guess, if I could say it that
And
way.
parents, and
And
parents,
parents.
just a
Yeah.
more joyful, I
Yeah.
mean,
Just a
parenting
better
is
world to live in.
exactly, that's exactly
Just
it.
just a better world to live in. Um, well, with that, my final question would be, if there's anything of this conversation that you'd want people to know, what do you think you want to leave the listeners off with today?
Get curious and learn more, because you don't know what you don't know, but you're missing a lot without starting to dig deeper. And we are all connected to males, whether it's our, husbands or sons, or, fathers or brothers, or males are part of our world. And for men and women to understand what that means just is going to make things better for all of us.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And where can people find you online and access your material and your podcast?
Probably the best place to go is the website, which is Sonhood Coaching, Sonhood Coaching, and there's freebies on there to get people started, with this curiosity. Um, There's something about the podcast on there that will direct you. There's a link to the book in case you're interested in that way. There's a blog on there that will get you going, and the links to I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. So I'm all over the place.
All over the place. Well, we wish you the best of luck, and I can't wait to have this conversation sometime soon in the near future. With that, that has been episode 54 of Solo Spotlight. Thank you so much, Kathryne, for coming on. I really appreciate it, and this has definitely been a nice educational episode that definitely gives some gives especially my listeners a launch pad to go research this more, look at your look at the resources that you've built up, look at the episodes, and get more of insight into masculinity and boyhood. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you
And
for the
for
conversation. Thank
yeah,
you.
of course. And with that, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow to Spare Bedroom Studios so we can continue to have more conversations like this. And leave in the comments below, what did you think of this conversation? And what are what are some things that you think you're going to take as actionable insights into your daily life? Thank you very much. Good day.